Welcome back to another episode of the Decision Hour. I am your host, Adam Bird. Got another great interview lined up for you today, folks. Today we're talking with a veteran, Iraq veteran. He's an author and an artist. What does that mean? Well, we're going to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stephen Russell. Stephen, how are you, my friend?
Doing all right, Adam. How's it going on your end?
Good, man. Good. I appreciate you taking time to talk with us today. So let's dive right into this. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So as far as my military background, I have 10 years experience in the U.S. Army. Consistent 11 Bravo. Last stint, I finally went airborne, stopped being a dirty leg. Yeah. But, I joined up fresh out of high school in 2004, right off the back of, the invasion and all that. Like everybody else, we were all kind of like hot under the collar over 9/11 and what was going on. And everybody just kind of had that buzz going on at the time. And I was probably the least likely candidate to join the military. I was the theater, choir, and art kid. So no sports, no anything like that going on.
Yeah.
I was full, in the artistic world. And it was just something about my perception at the time. I knew that this was going to be like a world type event. And I wanted to be a part of it and experience it. And, I heard that like call to adventure kind of thing. And I, it's like, okay, let me test myself in a way that I haven't been tested before.
Yeah. And you decided 11 Bravo was the way to do it. That couldn't have been more extreme or polar opposite for that matter from the background.
Yeah. I decided if I was going to do it, I was going to go, full in and, jump straight in and be on it. I didn't want to be a guy who was like talking to my grandkids years later and like, well, I was mopping floors or, cooking something or doing this or that. I was like, no, I want to see what this is all about and participate in it, and I certainly got my my slice of action and things like that. When I first joined up, I either luckily or unluckily, my first unit in Korea was a LRS D unit. So it's a bunch of like angry, pissed off, Rangers and and special forces guys. Seeing we had 13 privates in there, all fresh out of basic, and God. Yeah, it was just they were like fresh meat. This is great.
Yeah. So that was your first. So your first active duty unit was in Korea.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I specifically chose Korea as a part of my contract. They were offering crazy bonuses and things like that. And I took a hit on the bonus because I wanted to get out of the United States and go see things. And, I had my uncle, Paul Gunn, he served in the Korean War, and his father, Pappy Gunn, was a famous World War II fighter pilot out in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Crazy story because, his family got captured in the Philippines by the Japanese, and they were in the Japanese prisoner of war camp. And then all of that comes full circle later for me because I end up serving in two of the units that were critical in rescuing them.
Oh, wow.
in those things. So it's wild how those, things play out.
Yeah. That is, that's wow. That is so cool. And to have that family tie, with it. And like that is crazy.
Yeah. I didn't realize both of the ties until, like a decade later, but it was, once I found out about it, it was pretty special. And yeah, so I went to Korea, went to the LRS D unit, and it was a bunch of guys who had been in the invasion. I mean, we're talking dudes had like mustard stains on their jump wings from Panama and, Grenada and all these other places.
It's like the old school cats. That's, I'm
yes.
I joined, pre the war. So we were still at peacetime when I joined into the late 90s. And those were all the guys that were like, our drill sergeants. And so you had just the tail end of Nam and Grenada and the first Gulf guys were all kind of our group that kind of trained us. So, yeah.
Yeah. So when people are talking old school Army, that was in my face. I saw it, it was, it's like, I was there. I know it existed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, as insane as it was, it definitely, exposed me to what I could expect later on in probably I would say a better way than most people who just join up. They go regular Army, and then next thing they know, they find themselves out in Iraq or Afghanistan or something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of stories like that where dudes are signing up and a month out of basic, they're already overseas.
So you go to Korea. What happened? And was it usually a 1 year, or back in my day, it was like a 1 year tour, hardship tour over there. So where'd you go after Korea then?
So, well, I finished off Korea, like most people, with my first Article 15, my first field grade.
Do I dare ask what it was for?
It was the stupidest shit.
Of course,
ever.
Of course it was. Of course it was.
I took a weather pass and it was rainy. I went to Seoul on a weather pass. And I got caught.
Now, explain to the listeners weather pass in Seoul and why that is.
Yeah. So in Korea, especially back then, when Kim Jong-il was still in power back then, not his son, and what people don't realize is that Korea is the longest standing war that America has been involved in, because the armistice wasn't signed until I want to say it was like 2018, 2017, 2018. So technically, since the 50s till 2018, we were like technically at war with Korea, and they treat it more harshly. And in the Lurs D unit that I was in Uijeonbu, they were very lax about the rules. You could go out on the town as long as you didn't get caught by the MPs for curfew and things like that. No one cared. Like, especially if your dudes are pulling gate guard, like nobody's going to tattle on you because no one wants the fallout from that, right? So when that unit disbanded after we had been there 9 months, they moved us to Camp Casey. And I had never experienced Big Army. I didn't know what this was. And so after we went on a field project for like, I think it was like 30 days, we came back and I was like, you know what? We're hitting the weekend. I'm going to Seoul. I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to have fun, blow some steam off. I didn't put in for a pass because I was just used to like, hey, I'm just going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Big Army. Big Army ruins everything. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came back and they were like, where were you this weekend? It's like, Seoul. And they were like, we got you, fucker. I was about to get promoted to E4. I got dropped down to E1, 30 days extra duty.
Wow.
Yeah, 30 days extra duty, 30 days loss of rank, loss of pay. So, I was feeling really shitty at this point.
Oh.
Really shitty. And to make matters worse, my last 30 days, my drill sergeant from basic training shows up at the unit and becomes my platoon sergeant.
You gotta love those. Like, I love those stories. Like,
yes.
Oh, you mother.
Yeah. So this is the mindset I'm in. I'm pretty down at this point. I'm pretty just like stuck in your feelings, all this kind of shit. Like, man, I have really fucked up. What is going on here?
Yeah.
And so the unit they send me to after that, which is the first unit involved with the family ties, was the first Cav at Fort Hood.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I go there, and as soon as I get there, of course, they're like, hey, we're going to Iraq. I'm like, yeah, I figured, everybody's going.
Yeah.
And I think we had, I want to say it was like 60 days before we headed out. And within those 60 days, still not having all the knucklehead out of me, I decided that I would tack on another Article 15 before we headed over
Of course. I mean,
to Iraq.
I mean, what do you got to lose at this point, right?
Exactly. And so me and a bunch of friends at the time, battle buddies got together. We're not the crazy thing is we're not even drunk. We're just being stupid as shit. And we were driving on I-35 from Austin back to Fort Hood after a weekend of hanging out at lakes and doing stupid shit. And my buddy had bought all these airsoft rifles, which we used to play airsoft games in the freaking barracks and all that.
Jeez.
And just as a dare, he just looks over at me. We see a Porsche out there across 4 lanes of traffic. This dude's window is down, and he's like, "I bet you couldn't hit that guy." And I was like, "None of these airsofts can shoot like that." So it's like, whatever, I can't do it. And I stuck the gun out the window and fired. It caught the air just right. And it tagged that guy. We get pulled over, all that kind of good shit. And they didn't press any charges, but that doesn't matter because the Army, once something like that comes up on the blotter report,
God,
the Army's got you.
Yeah.
And we got.
So how bad was that? Now you were already knocked down to E1, so I'm assuming
Yes.
there's just so it was another 30 days for this one too, or
No. I got 45 days, but I had to serve the 45 days in Iraq. And that is what like put me on the straight and narrow. Because that was your classic, like you're on the base stirring flaming piles of shit, from the shitters.
Now where were you in Iraq?
I was in Bakuba.
Okay.
So we were in the heart of the surge,
Yeah.
where everything was kicking off in Diyala, 30 miles northeast of Baghdad.
Right.
Right when we got there, it was my understanding that al-Zakari, the leader of Al-Qaeda, had just been captured. And then, that entire region just went up in flames and insanity.
Yeah.
And the Civil War was kicking off at the time.
And this would have been around 2006 time frame, right?
Yeah. So we got there in October 2006.
So let's fast forward after that. After you do your time. Now you come back from Iraq. How is that transition from that into the last, let's say, year of being in the military? What was that like?
So my first transition, because I had 2 active duty stints.
Okay.
And my
so
my
was
first
there a
transition
break in service then? You got out and then went back
Yes.
to active duty? Okay. So explain that. How'd that work?
I did the National Guard, but they had some program where it was like if you do a year and a half in the National Guard, they would cut off all your requirement time to the military.
Yeah.
So most guys, you got to do the 8 years that they could call you back.
Right.
And then you were supposed to also be on a stabilization contract as well, so they couldn't pull you up for deployment.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I mean that's best case scenario. So I signed that, did the National Guard unit, and then I'm trying to apply for college because that's what you're supposed to do. I'm moving in with a buddy, back in Houston, and as soon as I get out, I think within a month, Hurricane Rita hits Houston, tears Houston a new asshole.
Yeah.
Rips my condo wall completely off, and then I can't even go to school because the school's been flooded out, and Houston's all underwater and shit like that.
Oh,
I'm sitting there. I can't work. I can't go to school. I'm just like, what the fuck did I get myself into?
Right.
And that was kind of the slap in the face there. That's just life, kicking you a new ass. But the real thing that hit me and sort of like started to get the wheels turning about like how things are going to go for soldiers and veterans and what it's really like on those experiences was going to my first job interview. My buddy got me the interview. He's like, hey, I work here, you can work here. Well, while you're doing your college thing. I was trying to do the EMT program, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that for the first semester, and then once I get EMT certified, I'll go, do the EMT thing.
Right.
And yeah, so I'm sitting there, first job interview, and I'm telling this guy about my service. I got 4 years active duty service. I got out honorably, did a year and a half in Iraq. I got a Purple Heart, like all this kind of stuff. And at the end, after all of this kind of stuff, he's like, so in other words, what you're telling me is all you have is a high school education. And it was like, oh shit, like that's the economic, the work labor force perception of you when you get out, and I had heard it. I'd heard all the jokes while I was in, like, you're going to get out, you can be a cop or a janitor. That's fucking it. Like it's, and you kind of like don't believe it because I grew up around military. My dad was a veteran in Vietnam. I had an uncle who was a ranger in Vietnam, all these people. And although you may hear about, their experiences with people, like especially the Vietnam veterans, how they were treated, what you always heard was just by being a veteran, that like raised your value in society.
Well, yeah.
Or
so we
my
thought.
dad, like my dad, he went from being a lineman at Honeywell all the way to being a computer systems engineer writing code for all the chemical plants in the Southeast, area on the Gulf.
Yeah.
With no college education. The only training he got was through the company, but it was one of those things. It was like, you're a Vietnam vet. We're going to fast track you through because we know, we know your value.
There's loyalty there. There's hard work. The things that come with being a veteran, that the perception of this guy's going to be a hard worker. He's loyal. Mm-hmm. We can rely on him.
Yeah.
Kind of
your ability to problem solve, like all that, going into it. And nowadays it's more of the, like, you'll look out and see like a yellow ribbon on every other car.
Yeah.
But when you're like, hey man, can I get a decent job that's going to, take care of me and, pay me as well as I was when I was in the military? They're like, ooh, I don't.
Now I just want to say thank you for your services. Now you're asking too much. Let's not get.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So when you got out of the military, then what was the first thing that you? I mean, I know you went back into the military and served time. Another 5-6 years?
Yeah, another 5 years.
Right. So where was your last duty station? Let's start there. Last duty station after the second time.
Last duty station was Fort Bliss, El Paso.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am too.
That was our MOB station in 03. So I'm very familiar with McGregor Range and like all of that out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew how bad it was going to be because we had to do railhead out at Fort Bliss before we went to Iraq. And yeah, I was like, I know what this is like. Yeah.
Having a flashback right now. So when you got out of the military, what'd you do? Like, because I know eventually when I want to tie this into what you're doing now as an author and as an artist, was that something? Did you jump right into that, or did you do a few things before getting into what you're doing now?
Not really. Like the first time I got out, I'm running around like everybody else with like a chicken with my head cut off.
Yeah.
The only direction you have is like go to school. They keep saying like have a plan. You're like, I don't know what that means. Yeah. It's just like, yeah. But you're finding out left and right that like you're not able to leverage your military skills in any meaningful way. Right. And this later becomes my soapbox that I stand up on, that it's like, it's so difficult for military people to get out of the military and then jump into the exact same corresponding civilian job. It's almost impossible.
Okay.
Without extreme money or, in some cases, a little bit of college, but most of the time it's all the certifications and, civilian training that you don't have access to,
Yeah.
even though you did in the military.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of the training you get in the military is better than, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, the job that you do in the
Yeah.
military is a lot better than what you know more than most of the civilians in some of the jobs. Some jobs,
Yeah.
not all jobs, but there's
Like
quite a
my-
few of them that when you get out, you're like, I should easily transfer into this job. I have more experience than people that have been doing this job as a civilian for 5 years.
Absolutely. Like my first big example was, that first time I got out and Hurricane Rita hits, and they were afraid that, it was going to be a repeat of, New Orleans, right? And with all the looting and all the crazy stuff like that. So they had signs up in Houston like, hey, we are trying to hire armed security guards. If you've got that, come here. And I was like, well, my job's underwater, school's underwater. Let me go see if I can, do a little armed security work while this levels out. And I go talk to him, and I was like, hey, man, I just got back from Iraq. Infantry dude, perfect, armed security, no problem. And he's like, you're not certified to do this. You don't have a TCLO. You don't have a concealed handgun license. You don't have a WPPS. Like, and it's just like,
And the list goes on, right?
Yeah.
So then talk about how you get into being an artist and an author then.
Yeah. So, from the best thing for me, because I wrote a memoir about my deployment and my first enlistment called Troublemakers, the greatest dog and pony show in Iraq. And because I mean, yeah, that deployment was an absolute shit show, and it was pretty intense. Like, we lost 12 guys in our company alone, and probably at least twice that in people that got messed up permanently, disabled and things like that. So it was extremely intense, but at the same time, it was just like a chaos that you couldn't like hammer down. But
Right.
it was a weird juxtaposition where you're dealing with the military, but it was the most free I ever felt in my life, of just like freedom of responsibility, freedom of like all these societal constraints and everything. And it was this whole deal. So I was like, I've got to write about it. So when I got back from Iraq, I sat down and I wrote down everything that I could remember. I was like, I'm just going to, take like a weekend, and I'm just going to write down whatever I can remember. And then it took me about 10 years of going through that process to actually like turn that into a story and try to write that into a book.
Yeah.
And, I'd put it down at times. I'd come back to it. I'd go over it, and drawing was one of those things too, where it was like, I doodled. Even in the Army, I was the guy that if we wanted to doodle something, I could doodle something up and all that. I had like a combat monkey drawn on my gunner shield, and all kinds of stuff. There's definitely a story in the book about what we did to a bombed out room with soot in there.
So real quick, let me interrupt you real quick. So
Yeah.
Troublemakers, it's a book. You wrote
Yeah.
it. For the listeners that are listening right now, where can they find that?
You can find it on Blue Ear Books, the publisher,
Okay.
his website, or Amazon. It's it's readily available on Amazon.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Please continue. So you write the book, and
we were
doodling.
we were called Troublemakers too. That was our platoon name.
Gotcha.
And that's why the book's called that.
I can't
And the
imagine why
reason
they
we were
would call
called-
you guys that.
It was because every single person in the platoon had at least one field grade out of 15. Not company, one field grade.
I just see like the commander. It's like, and these are our delinquents. Yeah, those are all of our.
That's my favorite story to retell from the book, is the mural that we drew, or that I drew,
Yeah.
on that bombed out room that we had, because we had to take the cop that we started in Iraq.
Yeah.
We had to fight our way in and then take over it. And one of the rooms we bombed out with flashbangs and stuff like that, and there was soot all over the walls. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm just going to start drawing here. And everybody treated it like a cave. You're doing your cave paintings in there,
Yeah.
when you weren't on guard or duty, we're just going in there and drawing shit. And on the back wall, I drew like a life-size version of all four Ninja Turtles with April O'Neil going at it. Yeah. And so when we when, after a few months, CNN wanted to come and interview our company because we were the first company to start cops in Iraq and do the combat outposts and actually live amongst the people and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So they're coming out. They wanted to interview us. We got told Katie Couric was supposed to come out, but something happened. She didn't end up coming. But and it's probably good because my commander is walking around showing these guys the cop, right? He's like, here's this, here's that, blah, blah, blah. And he had no idea about this room. So he goes over to this room and he's like, oh, yeah. And then this thing, and he opens the door and you see straight back and see what it is. The cameraman can see it too. And he's trying to get a shot. And he just closes the door real quick. And he's just like, this room is classified.
Yeah.
And after those guys leave,
I got my third article 15.
It was even better because he walks back into that room and we all follow him in there because we're just like, oh shit, like what's gonna happen? And you can see like his belief in humanity just leave his eyes when he sees all this wall of smut and sin and just like these are the people that I'm with.
It's like, what in the hell am I?
Yeah. And I piped up and I was like, sir, can we keep it? He just walked the fuck out.
For those of you that are listening, and there's a lot of you that listen to this show that are non-military, there's when you go down, we call when you go down range or you get deployed, there's a lot of, we do some dumb shit.
Oh yeah.
and it's kind of like our entertainment. It's our outlet. It's not, it's just different, and a lot, you got to keep in mind, like a lot of us are young at that age, or, at that time, and not fully mature, I guess you would say, but it's an outlet. So wanted to explain that because I got a lot of listeners that are like, what the hell am I listening to in this? So Stephen, we're coming up on time, and I want to get into what you're doing now. And there's some stuff coming up too, and then I want you to give out, like, how can people can reach out to you?
Yeah. So I publish a comic on Global Comics called Tales of Nihilism. A lot of this is my expression of veteran struggles that I've had transitioning out of the military and using the comic medium to tell those stories. Our first main series is called The Ballad of Philip Kirshner, and it's about a normal guy, and he lives in a world full of superheroes, but it shows you just how like terrifying and awful and inconveniencing it would be to exist in like a world that had like Superman or Spider-Man or some shit like that as a normal dude, And I'm taking a lot of these experiences I've had as a veteran trying to, transition and using those to tell these kind of stories. So we publish that on Global Comics. We've got, the whole Facebook, Instagram, all that, the social medias for Tales of Nihilism. They have print on demand options so you can purchase copies or digital copies or subscribe. There's all different ways. And we also have a Gmail associated with that, talesofnihilism@gmail.com. So that's kind of like my first project there. And then, of course, there's the memoir through Blue Ear Books. It's our story, as Bone Crushers and First Cav guys, that we went through that. And not a lot of people realize how how insane Iraq was. What, when you tell people like, there was a civil war that occurred over there, they're just like, what are you talking about? And at the same time, like there's 4 years for me that are like missing from American culture and society because I was, overseas and deployed most of that time.
Right.
And it's not like today where you've got, internet, instant messaging, social media apps, you're cut off and closed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's those trade-offs. So there's that. And then I'm also a contributing artist to Addie's Veteran Magazine. I illustrate military cadences under the pen name The Salty Skipper.
I like that.
Yeah.
Salty Skipper.
Just trying to, preserve that culture and things like that. Because a lot of those kind of things I saw getting lost in the new army, the new military,
Yeah.
which is, becoming more like a corporate organization, more like a business rather than, a state ran military.
Yeah. No, I very much hear you there. What do you got coming up next? What's next?
Yeah.
For
So, yeah. Normally, what we do is we'll attend like 2 or 3 conventions through the year because on Tales of Nihilism, I work with my writer Joseph Miles Pittman.
Now, when you say events, are you talking like Comic-Con or something like that? Is that? And that may be an ignorant question. I apologize, but like, what type of events?
Yeah, so I'll go to like local comic conventions. I typically try to stay in the indie scene and stuff like that. And what we do to like fund those things is we offer advertising space in the comic to small businesses. So if you're a veteran-owned business, that's a great way to reach out to a broad community. But this year we have like a Super Bowl kind of goal that we want to hit up, and there's a event called Veteran Comic Con in San Francisco. They run that Veterans Day or Veterans Day weekend every year, and this is a place for all sorts of veterans, not just artists and comic creators, but you're talking actors, musicians, podcasters, anybody in the veteran media sphere to engage with and go with that convention. They got wild cosplayers and all that kind of fun stuff going out. So that's kind of our goal, and we're trying to seek sponsorships and advertisers so that we can go there and bring as many people with us as possible to that event.
Okay. All right. We're going to have all of this information in the show notes below. So those of you that are listening to this, you're already on the internet anyway. Or just open up another browser. Click on that. Yep. Go check out Steven's stuff. I got one more question for you, brother.
Absolutely.
We're on the show is called The Decision Hour. Okay. Mm-hmm. We have to make decisions every day, and you've given some colorful decisions already.
Yeah, absolutely.
But name a time in your life where your feet are on the line and you have to make that decision. What is it, and what's the atmosphere like for you at that time?
I would say for me, the last kind of decision where it had that amount of weight was probably leaving the military the second time. My second stint was 2012 to 2017, and I had a colorful deal that time. It was less, punitive because I had my head screwed on straight by then. But I had taken so many hits on the head and gotten some TBIs, and I was no longer qualified to go back to airborne units. And then I go from Italy to Fort Bliss, and I'm staying there, for a year and thinking, I'll find a way to get back to an airborne unit. I'll find a way to do this. And once I started talking to the career counselor, and he's like, this is not an option. And, it's one of those things where once you get stationed at a base like Bliss, they try to keep you there as long as possible.
Right.
and they're not offering options for you to go out and do extra thing, try to get away basically. And
Right.
that's all I wanted to do, is like get out of this place. And I was like, okay, if I can't go back airborne, if I can't, do this, I'm not going to stay at Fort Bliss. And so that was my like decision time. It was like, do I get out again and brave the world and try to, reintegrate once again, or do I leave the military? And I was looking at where the military was, where things were going, and I was like, this is not the military I joined,
Right.
back in 04 and 08. That brotherhood, that camaraderie is like completely different. It's not gone, but it's just completely different. And there are things about the military, it's like, I don't fit in here anymore. So let me go see, I'm in a better position now to exit the military, and I at least have a better idea of what I'm getting into.
And that can be tough. It's a hard decision to make sometimes, but I remember when I had to pull the trigger, no pun intended, but like make that decision to leave the military. Stephen, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for taking time, folks. We got all of the Veterans Comic-Con that's happening November 11th in San Francisco this year. We're going to have that information. We got all the links where you can find the books and the comics. Make sure you check that out. We're also going to have his contact information, the Gmail that he mentioned there as well. Before we let you go, make sure you check out our parent network, Heroes Media Group. Simply go to heroesmediagroup.com. You can check out all the podcast shows there, all the new articles. And if you're a podcaster or an author and you would like to work with us, just send us an email, info@heroesmediagroup.com. That's all the time that we have today. Folks, until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.